Good afternoon, anti-novelists and friends. Welcome to this episode of Zettelkasten for fiction writers, where imagination finds order. So in this reboot of the Writing the Book series, beginning with episode 100, we've been looking at different components of the story writing from different perspectives. So we looked at the zero draft, we looked at some of the things that can go into the zero draft, and I'm going to continue down that road in the next video. But today I want to talk about identifying a continuum of story and deciding what kind of story do you want to tell and what do you want that to look like. So I've pulled card number 2024-11/12, number 104, and this is a representation of different kinds of story. So on the one end of the continuum, you have a traditional Western conflict-driven narrative, okay? Usually that's going to take place in 3 or 4 acts. You're going to have 8 plot points or 4 major plot points with smaller incidences happening in between. But ultimately, you're looking at a conflict-driven narrative. So what is that? Does that mean that you have to have bombs blowing up and dead bodies everywhere and mega drama? Not necessarily. A conflict-driven narrative can be a human conflict, right? It can be conflicts that are happening within your character. But the key is there are challenges and conflicts that are the main points that test your character and force them to prevail and keep driving through in order to get to the end and the resolution. Okay, so that's a conflict-driven narrative. Then the next thing on the continuum is a challenge narrative. So a challenge narrative is not conflict outright, okay? It's not two forces butting heads to shake up and make your character get into that conflict try-fail cycle. Okay, a challenge is simply something that challenges their perspective, challenges their situation. It's just something that they come up against that they must grapple, struggle with, and ultimately either win or lose to. Okay, so that can be smaller story elements, like simply a problem with another person. You know, it can be differing perspectives, differing points of view. So a challenge is a much quieter story than a conflict-driven story. Then we get into the more meditative forms of story. So the first one I've got on our list is an observation. So maybe your character is existing in one world, okay? And then something happens, some kind of challenge, some kind of something that makes them look at things in a different way. It's an observational change. Sometimes this is called attitudinal. It's like in debate, you have different kinds of inherency, and inherency is a thing that is keeping your plan from going into effect. Well, an attitudinal inherency is something that has to be dealt with. It means that someone's attitude is preventing them from making a change or an advancement. So that would fall under observation. Next is an insight, where observation is more of a distant thing that happens. It's something that happens at arm's length. Insight goes right into your internal character life. So this can be something that perhaps they flip a perspective or they come to some insight. Perhaps they come to change who they are because they get an understanding of someone else's perspective. Okay, so that's another example of a subtle change, an insightful change. And finally, we have a story that is a meditation. So completely opposite of a conflict or a challenge-driven story, a meditation is a very quiet consideration of some aspect of a story, generally an aspect of someone's life or of that character's life. So they're not going to follow a character arc that begins here and then, you know, something challenges them and they have a downfall and then they have to learn, you know, that up and down kind of plot story model that we lined out in the last episodes. Yeah, it's not that, okay? A meditation is a quiet, more of a reflective story. Perhaps it's an older character and they're simply meditating and reflecting on how they've lived their life. So that's not conflict driven. That's not they're challenged by something that they have to overcome and fight battles and ultimately win. It's not a hero's journey at all. It is simply a meditation that takes us from the beginning to the end in a quiet and reflective way. So my question to you is, what kind of story do you want to write? Where does your story fall on this continuum? This is something that I want you to ask yourself. Yesterday, I asked you to do some free writing in your character's voice so you can really lock in who they are, lock in your grasp of them. So today, I want you to consider, what kind of story do you want to tell? The reason I ask is over here. If you look at where I am in the book, I am working on chapters 12 through 17. Those are my chapters on different kinds of story. And you'll note we've got a character-driven narrative. We've got conflict-driven narrative. We've got non-linear methods. Those are fun to examine. We'll have a blast with that. We've got script writing derivatives, episodic or serialized stories. So there's a whole lot of different ways that you can approach your story and determine how you want to tell the tale that you have to tell, and in what that's going to look like for the reader. So that is your assignment for today. Consider, what kind of story do you want to tell? And then what does that look like for your reader? Are you going to unpack a fast-driven, action-packed conflict narrative? Or are you going to unravel a slow-rolling meditative narrative, or something in between? Drop me a comment if you know the kind of story that you'd like to write, or if you want me to go deeper into these, because we sure can with examples. But otherwise, we're going to continue down the road of, once you've started unpacking and discovering, developing these pieces that are part of your zero draft, what happens next? What's the next step? That's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. So I'll leave you on that cliffhanger. In the meantime, I am still sitting at 43,953 words. I did not write today. I just did some editing yesterday, so my word count didn't really change. But it's only 3:30 here at the Cattle Ranch, and it's a beautiful sunny day, which is why I've got the curtains closed, because it's wicked sunny out there. So I think I will take just a little bit of time and do maybe a sprint or two and work on these story architecture chapters, because these are going to be exciting. I hope they're useful. I think you will find them very informative and help you pick apart the kind of story that you want to tell. So with that, have a great rest of your day. I will be here in the library typing for a while, getting those words on the page. And I hope that you're doing the same, because I want to help you get your book finished. So I will leave you there. Thank you to every single subscriber. I love you guys. I'm grateful for all of you. You keep me going, especially on days when it's not easy. I still keep going, because that's what we do. So I will see you all tomorrow.